Hello and welcome back to Thoughtumentary, the podcast dedicated to interesting and enlightening ideas. Today I would like to discuss the One. Who is the One, and what is his role in history? The Chosen One is a recurring theme in human storytelling, and it's often paralleled with the storytelling archetype of the hero's journey, which, if you've ever studied literature, you're likely familiar with this classification. It describes and follows the life of a hero, telling his or her story from beginning to end, and their involvement in whatever world or environment the storyteller is detailing, with which, of course, they share the same fate. But the story of the One differs from a conventional hero's journey in that it is always accompanied by prophecy, a foretelling often millennia in advance of the Chosen One's arrival. Now, who does the choosing? Sometimes it's a god or goddess, a creator. Maybe it's just destiny itself, or fate. But the Chosen One is always one of us, in that he or she, although in our patriarchal society up until now it's almost always been a male figure, but all the same, they're born to humanity, or man, as we all are, with an unbeknownst to everyone else, divine or transcendent calling or purpose. This person has an all-important destiny or role to play that is quite literally intertwined with the fate of us all. The first written work of fiction by man telling the story of the One is, of course, Christianity, the tale of Christ. As unrest was growing out of hand throughout the Western world with regards to religion, and the Catholic Church was gradually losing control of its subjects, a convenient opportunity arose to capture its defectors with a newer, more captivating, and humanizing story. It wasn't an original tale, of course, as very few religions are, but it was nevertheless based on, as far as can be recollected, actual events. Jesus of Nazareth was a man. Some would call him enlightened, but he was simply sharing his philosophies with all those that would listen. Jesus' teachings, however, were very much inconsistent with the present doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church, and as his popularity grew, the Church had him executed in a most horrific way. Shortly thereafter, he would going forward be remembered as Jesus Christ, the Son of God. His memory singular and his deeds divine. No one will come after until the Lord Christ come again. Jesus' message, of course, was not that he alone was the child of God, but that we all are, and that God had become man so that man may become God. Which is, of course, why the Catholic Church had him crucified. But the focus of this discussion is not religion or Jesus Christ, but rather Christ's story and what it means for mankind. More specifically, that part about the second coming and how it parallels every prophecy of the One we've written about ever since. You see, the reason that we write these stories and why so many people live by them is because we have a problem. And our problem is that we're all born crybabies. Literally. Have you ever observed another animal on Earth that in its infant stages cries, seemingly without pause, for no other reason than just to cry? Of course not. Because if a non-human animal were to aimlessly cry on end before and after taking a nap, every predator in the jungle would hear it. So why us? Why does man? If you ponder this, It's really a very profound question, and is one of the best examples that I can point to when referencing the difference between man and the beast. I'll tell you. The reason that human beings are constantly crying aloud in life is because, as I've mentioned in past installments, we are gifted with unimaginably powerful tools which are able to transform reality into whatever we choose. But ironically, the choice to take action is the most difficult thing we face in life. And because we have this responsibility, or rather the ability to respond, we experience an entirely different echelon of fear from other animals. But to a regular adult, who is in fact just sleeping only with their eyes open, or to the rest of the animal kingdom, the baby is just screaming its head off for no observable reason at all. So, back to the chosen one. Why do we need it? The story, the tale. Because as I mentioned already, we all have the power, individually, to shape reality to whatever we want. But we, of course, share said reality with ourselves. And to most people, this is terrifying. And so, we need to be saved. We need to be saved because it's too painful. We can't handle it, can't bear the burden. Someone has to take it away, save us, because we are in need of saving. So, let's go back to the Christian story. The Christians are just like that infant in the jungle. Only they've been crying out to be saved, to themselves and to anyone that will listen. Help me! I'm terrible, I'm weak, I'm afraid. And they've been waiting for thousands of years for Jesus Christ, a man who never existed, to return again and save everybody. Save them from what? They don't know. Oh, and at the same time, everyone who was ever mean to them or doesn't partake in their sacred wallowing is going to be thrown into a fiery pit to burn under excruciating pain for an eternity by the Savior, who is God. I say to you that of all the stories written by man foretelling the arrival of a chosen one, this is the most sadistic and evil. There are many more modern stories like this, however, and the dominant medium for storytelling today is filmmaking. The Christian tale of the one and the second coming of Christ has been told numerous times through film, or motion picture, which are two very antique terms in the year 2017, but they are nevertheless the ones that we use. End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the movie Legion with two lesser-known stars accompanied by Dennis Quaid are two of my favorite versions. But before I conclude this discussion, I would like to connect all of this to a very modern telling of this story, which is also spoken through film, in 3 installments. The Matrix trilogy, which if you haven't seen, I would highly recommend it to you. If you haven't seen all of them and would like to avoid having them spoiled, well then, save the timestamp and come back later. The Matrix, which was very influential in my upbringing, is a story devised by the Wachowski siblings and is eerily similar to our reality in the present day. And this is why it's such a magnificent telling. And if you truly understand its meaning, it can be very enlightening. So, I will summarize the meaning that I have extracted, which may or may not have been a conscious intention made by the directors of the film, but is nevertheless what we have. The plot takes place in the not-too-distant future, after a time when man has invented artificial intelligence, which became conscious of not only itself, but of the degeneration of the human race. The intelligence gave rise to machines, which later on enslaved the humans, using their physical bodies as an energy source to power their civilization. And this was done through an ingenious ploy which involved birthing the humans into an artificial reality known as the Matrix, which is symbolic of our everyday lives in the modern society, but is articulated to the viewer in the form of a computer program or simulation, which is the world as we know it, a game, a fabrication, a fiction. There are humans, however, that have become aware of this computer-made reality, and they did so by extension of a single man who was born within the Matrix, his mind enslaved like everyone else's. But in young adulthood, he became aware of his prison. He learned its rules. He saw the strings, so to speak, and he realized, this is the important part, that by using his mind, that he could change the rules. He could write new ones. He could violate the laws of this reality. And upon seeing him do this, the humans became enlightened and the machines horrified at this glitch, this anomaly in their program. And so a process began, the ongoing enlightenment, growing awareness of the modern humans, and over time they became increasingly more difficult to control. The machines had to keep recreating the Matrix. They made it, I think, 6 or 7 times in the story. Remade it, improved upon its original design, which is originally thought to be perfect. It did, after all, work perfectly, except for this one person, this chosen one that would not be controlled and seemed to consistently gain omnipotence within the Matrix, or at least bordering on it. He couldn't be controlled. This person eventually left the Matrix, started waking up the other humans, and with them burrowed deep underground where the machines were not, and built a city. Many centuries passed, and there was a resistance. The man died, but a prophecy was foretold that he would come again, and again, and again. So much of this history is lost, but this one thing remains. The prophecy, communicated by an oracle within the Matrix itself, was told to a single man who was willing to believe it, and his name was Morpheus, the god of dreams. Morpheus was told that he would find and awaken the One, the man who would lead humanity to salvation once more. Morpheus took his destiny and this prophecy to heart until he found a man living within the Matrix, his name Thomas Anderson, which is really unimportant, because the name by which he interacted with everything and everyone in cyberspace was Neo, N-E-O, which if unscrambled can be reorganized to spell one. Neo was well past the age of awakening, not unlike Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one of the Star Wars universe, but he must be awakened all the same to his latent potential, his powers. So they found him, they snatched him up from his test tube prison in which the machines were keeping him, and immediately began training Neo to discover his powers that nobody else has, and that will eventually lead humanity to salvation. I know Kung Fu. Since the moment of his awakening from the Matrix into reality, Neo was told from the beginning, you are the one. There's no one else like you. You can do anything you set your mind to. Which in the story is of course true, because the Matrix is a computer program, and the enlightened humans have learned to bend its rules, and are able to, for example, jump from the top of one skyscraper in a metropolis-like city to the top of another. Leap fantastic distances, defy gravity. Which is, of course, a metaphor for what the body is capable of, but what the mind does not see. The formula for achieving this miraculous feat is simple. Free your mind. Translation: believe that you can jump this fantastic distance, defy gravity, break all the known laws of physics, and this is all you need to do it. Free your mind. Morpheus, who is in his own right a bit of a prodigy, known as the most dangerous man alive by the machines, possibly because of his destiny, or at least his mission of awakening the One, he goes on to train Neo in martial arts, which is yet another physical application of the mind. And in short, he tells Neo, stop trying to hit me and hit me. Reminiscent of another famous mentor from Hollywood film. Do or do not. There is no try. So certain are you. Always with you what cannot be done. Hear you nothing that I say. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I love Master Yoda. But back to the Matrix. I want to explain how it is that Neo's experience is different from virtually everyone else's. You see, Neo has a guide. He has a mentor, which for all intents and purposes in this world, in this story, is his father, adoptive father of sorts, which of course all of us can relate to because we all have parents, although unfortunately not all of us grow up knowing them. And Neo's mentor tells him from the beginning, from the very beginning of his consciousness, that listen, son, you can do anything, literally anything that you put your mind to. You are the One. You can do it. These laws are meant to be broken. No one can stop you. You're the only one that can do this for yourself and for all of us. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? So, lo and behold, Neo does develop extraordinary abilities within the Matrix. Hell, he even develops psychic, psychokinetic, telekinetic powers outside of the Matrix in the real world, which not even he or Morpheus thought was possible. So, quickly, drastically, throughout the course of just half a film, Neo develops extraordinary abilities that nobody else has, and probably never has, save for except the Savior who lived thousands of years ago that was prophesied to return in the form of the One. And everyone around him is just looking on, completely dumbfounded. They don't know how to explain it. There were non-believers that became believers, the agents, the policemen, the guards of the Matrix, if you will, are completely frustrated by this person because he's kicking their asses, which is not possible. And by the end of the first film, this person, Neo, is actually rewriting the Matrix. He's going into the code, deleting lines and rewriting them. And he starts flying. He starts flying around in the computer world, like Superman. Now once the machines see this, by the second film, this is an unmitigated disaster. He has to be killed. They have to put a lid on it. They have to stop this from happening, the machines that is. Otherwise, all hell's going to break loose, and then they're going to have to rewrite the Matrix again. They're going to have to hit the reset button because Neo's going to awaken too many people. And how does he do it? Well, that pedestrian walking down the city street just saw him fly by like Superman. That's how. But here's the kicker. Here's the perhaps the most important plot point of this story. In the first film, Neo goes to see the Oracle, right? The same Oracle that gave Morpheus the prophecy, told him that he would find the One and blah, 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 everything will be saved. Second coming of Christ. And the Oracle tells Neo that you, son, are not the One. You've got the gift, but You're not the one. And so Neo walks away thinking, well, shit, how do I tell Morpheus this? It's gonna crush him. It's gonna break his heart. He's not gonna want to live anymore after this. But he does. And Morpheus is in denial. He doesn't believe him. He says, how can that be? I refuse. After all, I've seen you. You've beaten the agents in single combat. Nobody else has ever done that in history. I've seen you do these things. You are the one. And Neo, of course, himself has done these things. He's witnessed it firsthand. So he doesn't know what to believe at the midpoint in his journey. But he has this sneaking suspicion that no, he's not the one, because there isn't one. And maybe, just maybe, everybody else can do these things that I'm doing. They just don't realize it. You see? And so he goes on in his journey, and he becomes more powerful. And as this unstoppable force of good arises within the Matrix, so it must be met with an insurmountable counterpart, the evil, or the yang in the equation, the code that he rewrote in the first film, which is his mechanized counterpart. Now, that's a different element of the story that is a different layer of complexity that isn't essential to the telling of this story, at least for the purposes of this recording. But this entity's name is Agent Smith, right? If you've seen The Matrix, you know what I'm talking about. And for those who haven't seen the films, and maybe I've lost you, hopefully this is starting to make sense for you. So as a result of Neo waking up and developing his powers, coming into his own, the humans start to awaken sleeping people in the Matrix themselves at an unprecedented rate. You know, things are way out of control from the perspective of the machines, who are, after all, just trying to contain humanity as an energy source and can't run the risk of having them awakened because, after all, the humans are the creators of the artificial AI of the machines, and it's a war, it's a struggle to see who is going to inherit the planet. So the machines get real aggressive. You know, they know where the physical city is, Zion, the underground city where all the real humans are living. And they decide, we're going to destroy them. And so for a film and a half, the whole plot is revolving around how do we stop the machines from destroying our city and wiping out humanity from existence. Which is really just that element of the hero's journey side of the story that is told 1,000 times and 1,000 times again, which is not nearly as interesting as the spiritual or the symbolic nature of the films. You know, all movies must do well at the box office, and for that to be the case, they have to have rising action and a climax and so on. And at this point, I'd like to connect the story of Christianity, which we were talking about at the beginning of the discussion, to the example of The Matrix, which is really just a modernization of the same story, and how both of these things, fundamentally in their original telling, perfectly, although very discreetly, tell the story of the Chosen One and how it all works. By the end of the trilogy, while Neo has practically reached self-actualization, is essentially a demigod of sorts within the Matrix, the stakes are high, and it's either the destruction of the Matrix at stake or the destruction of humanity. A peace has to be brokered between the humans and the machines, because they do, after all, need each other, cannot survive, at least in this timeline, without each other. The Earth has been intoxicated to the point where you have to have machines to filter water or air, really just survive. And there's no adequate power source in sight for the machines to continue their existence without the human beings. Prophecies, as they are in works of fiction or in everyday life, are fickle things, because they never come to pass the way they were foretold, but at the same time always do in a sort of workaround way. Inadvertently, almost as if by accident, they They happen anyways. And this is very observable throughout actual human history. And the same is the case for the Matrix and Christianity and practically every other religious prophecy. By the end of the third film, Neo, he kind of has things figured out. He knows that his journey ends in sacrifice, that peace is never a constant thing in a universe that is based on chaos. But most importantly, and key to this discussion, Neo understands that he is at the same time not the one, because humanity is not a singularity, that our fates, our consciousness, our abilities are all connected, that the one refers to all of us, but at the same time, he is the one. He is the individual, he is the I, the me, the one responsible for his own fate, for his own actions, and most key to the story of the Matrix, he is the one, the only one, responsible for defining his own capabilities, which are, as I've said in many past discussions, for all intents and purposes, limitless, not just for Neo or a savior, but for all of us. And there are little clues thrown in the trilogy. For example, in the second episode, Morpheus actually bests an agent in single combat after having seen Neo do this firsthand, which was previously thought impossible. Now, does that sound familiar? The most common example in the real world, or at least what we call the real world, is one very often told, but probably the easiest for all of us to understand, at least with regards to our physical capabilities. And that is that for a very, very long time, it was believed internationally by the athletic community, or just everybody, that mankind could not run a mile in less than 4 minutes, which is a very abstract measurement of what the body is capable of, but at the same time very powerful. And then finally one guy did it. His name was Roger Bannister, and he did it by exactly the same way that all the characters in the Matrix jump from one skyscraper to another. He did it by freeing his mind. He said, no, forget that. I say what's impossible, and I will show you that this impossible thing is possible by doing it. You see, that's the choice. That's the decision. That's the not trying but doing mindset. And he did it. And today it is very common for people to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. Even pubescent children can do it. And the only difference is that these people have seen somebody else do the impossible. Morpheus had seen Neo kick an agent's ass, many agents. So he's like, you know what? These guys are really just pushovers. If Neo can do it, so can I. So there is no such thing as a chosen one, at least in the form of demigods that have abilities far above regular people and that they alone hold. But there is such a thing as leadership. Sometimes all it takes to achieve the impossible is to watch someone else do it. That's what Neo understood. And how did he arrive at that conclusion? Because someone told him that nothing was impossible and that he could do anything. I'm telling you that right now. And I'll continue to tell you that if you continue listening to this podcast. Because I believe it, and my belief, the same as yours, is the only necessary ingredient to make these things happen. So Neo's message, which is spoken through action by the end of the story, is the very same message that Jesus of Nazareth wished to convey. You see, Jesus said, listen, I am the Son of God. I am the end-all and be-all, the Alpha and the Omega of this cosmos. And guess what? So are you. I am the Son of God. You are the Son of God. You're the daughter of God. We are all God's children. Hell, If God is within all of us, then by extension we are all God. It's all one thing. It's all the same wishy-washy, can't put your finger on it, what the hell's going on here answer that we're all looking for. So in conclusion, and I know this has been a long discussion, the chosen one is you. It is your brother and sister, your father and mother, everybody you know is the chosen one. Because we all live within our own little universe, our own little world. We all see it in different ways. What guarantee do I have that the color red I see is the same tone that you see? Well, we know in fact, after all, that we see colors differently. That's another way of saying we see light differently. We see energy differently. Which is another way of saying that your universe is very different from my universe. And you will never experience the universe from my perspective, nor I yours. But the important thing to remember is that we live in the same universe, that it can be seen from an infinite number of perspectives. My vision of the world may be a heaven, whereas your vision may be hell. But we're looking at the same thing. And how is that possible? Because I choose to see it this way. In spite of all the horrors and all the destitutes of modern society and planet Earth, I choose to live in heaven. Because I can, and I can do anything that I wish for as long as I believe I can. That's what makes me the one. I'm the one that decides what happens here, and you have that very same power. And you exist in a harmony where there can be an infinite number of chosen ones. And don't you see, that is what makes this journey, if you will, a completely miraculous experience. Everything around you is a miracle. You don't need to see somebody flying without wings or jump from one skyscraper to another to realize that everything in your life is a miracle. Everything. Especially you. And, I like to talk about that in detail, but I think this one's running a little long. So, to all you Christians out there, if you're still listening, I'm not going to apologize to you for what I said. If you want to live your life by the Bible and hold out for the second coming of Christ, that's your choice. That's not the way I see the world, but I'm not going to condemn you or put you down because that you feel that way. I want you to understand that I'm not doing it to offend you or make you feel bad about yourself. The only reason I'm doing this project is because I'd like to try to help people. And if you ever feel that seething anger because something I've said offends you, I want you to know that's not what I wish. It's not my intention. Okay, so I want to thank you guys for listening. And don't forget to leave your comments, feedback, and ideas for future discussions that we can share in whichever platform, comments section that you find me on. And I thank you for listening.